Welcome, Lindsay. It's so amazing to have you here.
Thank you, Anna. I'm excited to be here and chatting with you.
We met through the mighty powers of LinkedIn. It's such a wonderful network. And Lindsay has so many titles and accolades to her name already, which are super inspiring. So, Lindsay is a founder and CEO of 1B Consulting, a management consulting firm specializing in luxury, lifestyle, and tourism. Lindsay is also a founder of FemTech Association in Asia. It's another topic that we're definitely going to cover tonight. And also, you have been living all over the globe. You've had such a wonderful career. I have many questions about that. So, you know how we start this podcast? We share a story of your first day in immigration. And because you've lived in many places, please let us see your journey as you've moved from one place to another. Paint the picture as vividly as you can.
Sure. So I think maybe, I've kind of lived in like a study abroad sense in university years, which of course is always a privilege. And I'm grateful to have been able to do that. I think when it comes to actually moving abroad and setting foot abroad, was in my 20s. And my first stop was London. First of all, planning to move and knowing, am I making the right decision? There's a lot of influences and a lot of voices around us when people say, oh, you're moving overseas. Are you worried about that? Or other people saying, oh, that's so exciting. I wish I could do that. So I think it's kind of silencing the noise around us and making sure that when we first choose to move, it's for reasons that we really want and that's the right thing for us. And I think that can be hard to do because obviously family misses us or friends miss us or our job is going really well. So it's stepping away from a more sure path, more established path with a community that we might be more familiar with. So I think when it comes to the first day, I'm fortunate in that I knew a couple of people in London, and obviously there wasn't a language barrier, which makes everything a lot easier. But my first day really was getting right into, I'd say, personal admin. And I think that was something that I expected, of course, but really just the challenges of setting up a bank account, of making sure the employment pass is set up, really all of the relocating the personal belongings. I think that really is a starting point that the glamour and the excitement of moving abroad when you first go is sometimes more about getting a phone and a phone number and a permit and kind of these basic things that can take time depending upon where you move. So I'd say the first thing that comes to mind when I think about moving abroad is of course excitement, but that is quickly reality sets in about what it takes to live abroad, which is the same things it takes to live in our home countries, essentially setting up the necessities for life.
You're saying this, and I remember my first day in Italy, how it was about, okay, this is my place now. I need to make it mine. This will be my coffee shop. This would be where I go print my documents. And this is the bus stop. I need to take my bus to go to the university. All of these things, I jumped into settling immediately. And maybe I missed a bit of this kind of, okay, I actually made it because it was such a long journey for me to get there. Um, all right, so that was London, and then you moved to other places as well. Now you live in Singapore. How has it
Do.
been for you?
Yeah, it's really great. I mean, I've loved living in multiple countries on multiple continents. I'm fortunate that I was able to pick up a passport along the way and became British despite this, very American accent, or I should say very US American accent. So yeah, I've been here about 4 years. So I moved here in January of 2020, just before COVID started. So obviously a pretty unique time for any of us, but especially a unique time to relocate. So it was actually navigating not only a new city and setting up a new home here, navigating a new career path and building communities, but with that added level of a lot of uncertainty during COVID and really just seeing how all of those things played out. Fortunately, Singapore handled COVID very well. And I felt that for me personally, what is a very traumatic event for many of us worldwide, the method, the strategy for managing this very difficult situation, I think was handled as best could over here. So we were able to kind of get back on our feet and start working quickly and build networks. And whilst travel was a little bit limited, to be honest with you, after having my last job in London, I traveled a lot. And so it was actually a silver lining in a tragic time to actually be based on the ground and get to kind of reestablish, myself here, even just mentally, to kind of come down from a really busy few years and put my feet on the ground solidly here in Singapore.
I think everyone had a very interesting experience with COVID, especially us in immigration.
Mm-hmm.
That was a really new experience because just the country you're in barely knew what to do. And then when it comes to either, renewing passports or documents or permits or visas or getting new people in, it was a whole mess. Here in Bulgaria, I must say that the government was really kind to extend the visas and permits that were expiring, which helped a lot of people because obviously no one could go anywhere, and it was a lot of stress for people. But other than that, I can say that just general COVID was handled in a very, very fun way, in the sense that I don't know how much you know about Slavic countries, but sometimes things are a bit like, okay, it's just like we'll figure it out, whatever. It's not really a big deal. So I felt, while being quite locked down in a sense here in Bulgaria, I didn't really feel the effects of COVID after the first 6 months that much, because people were not wearing masks. Almost, they were really, very, very cautious about vaccinations. So all of that was just very weird, knowing how strict people really felt in Singapore, or at that point I was working remotely for a Belgian news outlet, knowing how it was very, challenging and stressful for people there. It really felt like being in two different universes in a
Yeah,
sense.
it does. If we have to look at silver lining, which I always try to do, or the positives, would be looking at some of the creativity that came out of it, whether it was new businesses, tech solutions. It did bring to light some social concerns that we have to address, not in Singapore, I'm talking globally, of course, but maybe some social concerns around equality and equity, talking about women's health, which we'll get into later. And I think it brought to light some of these things as well. So there were definitely amazing parts of seeing humanity work together and collaborate and be creative and come up with new ideas. But obviously, the bigger challenge is, of course, on an individual day-to-day level. We all had our own experiences with it. It's interesting to see what comes from that now a couple years out, and how that creativity and entrepreneurship continues to change and grow, and more people get involved in entrepreneurship.
We saw a lot of innovative different ways to approach problems, and I'm really hopeful that this stays. I want to talk to you, of course, about entrepreneurship, but before that, I want to ask your opinion as someone who has built a massively impactful career all over the globe, in a sense, right? You've been in many places, but you've also collaborated, like in many countries, right? You led countries, the divisions, departments. So how can we be strategic about our career building? There is so much that we can do once we realize that we're not limited to the confines of our own countries. We see the world as big as it is, and then everything becomes an opportunity. It's about choosing, it's about being strategic. Maybe some people really want to explore the world through their work, they want to explore themselves through their work. And as someone who I see really is invested in making an impact in the world, how can we use our career for that? And then what would be the ideas and tips that you can share?
That's a really great question, and it's a big question. And I think, Anna, it starts with values. I remember people who said, "Oh, I wish I could do that. I wish I could move abroad." And I thought, man, goodness, if I can do it, certainly you can do it. There's nothing exceptional about me or more exceptional than anyone else. So it's really the idea of what are the values. And I think with career, it's looking at what are our values. Is the value actually first and foremost living abroad? Because then we might want to find a job overseas. That might not be our dream job. If it's finding our dream job, well, then it might not be living abroad, or it might be just making a move across the country or somewhere a little bit more attainable as a first step. Or if it is money, then probably how we're going to approach moving abroad is going to be more based on a larger company, perhaps, or working for a startup that looks like it has high growth potential. So I think a lot of it is around what are our lifestyle? How do we want our life to look day in, day out? Is it sunshine makes us happy and being near the beach? Or is it being near the mountains? Or is it somewhere with a great nightlife or a really great arts and culture scene? So I think a lot of it is around, first of all, being really clear about what our values are and why we want to live abroad. And I think when we look at our careers and knowing that if we do want to move abroad, making sure that that's aligned and making sure that our values, are there first, that we're moving for the right reasons for ourselves, of course. Secondly, I'm sure you've heard of Scott Galloway from the Pivot podcast and Prof G, and he talks a lot, which I do agree with. He talks a lot about find what you have that aptitude for, what you're good at, and get really, really, really good at that specialty. Really pour yourself into it. Because the reality is there are going to be opportunities where you're a leader in your field or in your function. So I have found that for me, for instance, when I moved to London originally, I was working in advertising. Now, I knew I didn't want to stay in the agency world forever. I definitely wanted to move to the client side. But I knew that the quickest way to move abroad was with something I already had that expertise working in. And then I made that transition. And once I moved to London, I made sure that the clients that I worked on were luxury clients because I knew that ultimately I wanted to work into the luxury space. So I started on the agency side working in luxury with top spenders for multiple brands, and then eventually selected the company I went to in the luxury world following, that progress. Finally, when we talk about being strategic with our careers, I think it's also being really open to something that we might not expect ourselves to be good at. So, for instance, something I'm very good at is problem solving and getting things done, that executional angle. And I think strategy is really fun, but I find so much of the value I can add is getting companies from point A to point B or helping them achieve their goals through that actual execution of whatever the strategy is. Being probably, a pretty resilient person, a pretty determined person. I think those things work to my favor. But my point there is just being open. If someone had ever said to me, would you like to run global operations for a company? I would have said, oh no, I'd prefer marketing or strategy, when actually a lot of my skill set was being open to the idea of the problem solving through an operational lens. So I think it's also being really open and being willing to explore things that might not be what we studied at university directly. Part of living abroad is really being open to new experiences, and that includes new career prospects and new companies and new skill sets or functions.
Actually, it's so personal to me, and it's a
Mm.
bit different from what your story is, because I didn't immigrate for the career. I immigrated to study to get a career, and I studied in a language that I got a bachelor in. So I studied in Italian, and it's kind of what you're saying, right? Like using the expertise, maybe unconventional expertise in something to get to the next step. And the funny thing is, even if I don't live in Italy anymore, and it turned out for me, as again, it was about being open, because I moved to Belgium and then I moved to Italy again, then to Bulgaria, and now I'm planning to go somewhere else. I still have Italian around me all the time. I have a business partner, my life partner. Like everything is so weird how sometimes it, aligns itself. And the thing was that, yes, the career that I wanted to have, I eventually got it.
Mm-hmm.
But now, after years of doing it, I also am ready for something else, and I'm developing myself in those areas and develop the skills in those areas. So, well, 10 years almost ago, I had a vision of me in immigration, where I would be, what I would be doing. It's completely different from what I'm doing right now, but still, I'm super happy about it. It's a much better place for me than what I've envisioned for myself before.
I think that's really great. I think probably what you just gave is some really great advice, which is, you don't need to plan, or I shouldn't say one doesn't need to plan 10 years in advance. Sometimes it's that short term or midterm plan that allows us to make the pivots or other decisions, because we're not so focused on one thing that we miss all the open doors along the way. If you had asked me 5 years ago, would I be living in Singapore? I would have said, well, maybe I'm open to it, but I don't know. I don't know if I'll be in Asia. I hope so someday. I'd love to keep exploring, but I'm not sure. So the fact that I'm sitting here, and even before that, if you had asked me, was I going to live in London or do secondments in China or New York City or all the other places I've been, Qatar or wherever I've done business, and stayed for a couple months on end, I don't know if I would have been able to ever say that. I think it's always just been, I've been open to those experiences. A lot of how I've built my personal life is to allow that flexibility to take advantage of things that look wonderful to me. To other people, I'm sure my life looks chaotic and like a nightmare, right?
Yeah.
Moving around the world every few years and reestablishing a career and reestablishing a community and a network. We talked a little while ago on a pre-call about never starting from scratch. And it really doesn't feel like starting from scratch, because everywhere I move, I just keep meeting more and more wonderful people and learning more and seeing more things. And we just build on our experience. And a lot of the people I've met, they also have moved around the world. So it's quite funny that I even know some people who've moved to Singapore that I knew in past lives in other countries. That's a really fun part of living abroad or living overseas from what would have been my original home of the US, which now I consider home London. But it's that's such a wonderful part of building a global network and a global career.
I feel the same, that it's always been for me like getting to the next level rather than starting from scratch. I feel like this internally as a person with my career, but also with my knowledge about the world. So every time things get a bit easier, you know a bit better what you need to do at the migration office, how you can, talk to people, what you can expect. Everything is easier. That's the word I can use. Maybe even more peaceful for me
Yeah.
internally. You just mentioned Singapore again, and I would love to discuss this, right?
Great. Are you moving
Because in
here? Are you going to move
Singapore,
here, Anna? Am I inviting you to move here?
actually, I don't know, but in December I want to go in Asia. My
Great.
base would be Kuala Lumpur,
Hmm.
but I want to come to Singapore for a few days because it's been a dream and it's been something that I
Sure.
feel is calling me at least for some time, because there is so much going on there. And maybe for the profile that I'm building for myself, right? Somehow, like you said, life brought you to all this experience because you were open. Life brought me to the topic of immigration and advocating for
Hmm.
immigrant rights, or at least at this point, I'm talking a lot about our challenges, and people seem to resonate a lot with it. So I'm not sure yet how I'm shaping it, but somehow Singapore is again one of those hubs with so many nationalities, with people having all the same challenges that we all have. And I don't know, it could be something really interesting to explore.
Definitely. I think, probably something you and I have in common is when people say, how does it feel to move abroad, to start a new business? I always think of myself as having kind of a triangle. Perhaps this sounds a little bit like you. It's that curiosity is one of the points, a little bit of purpose,
Yeah.
and then a little bit of passion too. So I think curiosity leads a lot of what I do, and that openness that comes from curiosity and learning and being willing to be uncomfortable or have to be a little bit more persistent or doing the hard things to get to experience the amazing parts of life. So it sounds like you have that
Hmm.
as well. And Singapore itself is just such an exciting city, Asia in general, which obviously a massive place. So I can't speak to Asia as a whole. You can really feel the energy and the growth and the excitement and the entrepreneurship and the creativity and the drive, the commercial aspects of business over here. You can just really feel it. And I think Asia is just a really exciting place to be. So I feel very fortunate to get to spend these years, especially post COVID here, where it's just on the up and up and it continues to grow and people continue to invest in Asia and continue to see this as a place for expansion and scaling in the future.
This is fascinating because I see that you're doing a lot there, also in a field that might be a bit more challenging, right?
Sure.
It's FemTech, it's focused on female health. So many topics there that make people uncomfortable, even in the Western societies. And I'm super grateful to see how many businesses are spending their money and time on developing the solutions that will help us feel more secure in our bodies, that will talk about menstruation, about sexual health, about fertility, all of the things that are super important. And as you rightfully say, it's not a niche, right? Female health is not about being a niche. It's half of the population, if not more. And I wonder, maybe kind of lumping the two questions together, because you transitioned to entrepreneurship when you moved to Asia, right? And then you transitioned into entrepreneurship in a field that is culturally a bit more challenging, maybe to even integrate with, right? So can you talk a bit more about that, your experience with building a business, but also pioneering certain conversations?
Sure. Thank you for asking that question and recognizing the challenge that is this industry, but also the opportunity that is femtech and women's health. I guess to start your topic about entrepreneurship, I think it was an unintentional start, but it was really one of those experiences of chatting with enough people and seeing a gap in the market that no one had really started an advisory and professional association or network that could support businesses in the health tech space that were specific to femtech or femhealth, specifically focused on women's care. I started it in October of 2021. And a lot of it was inspired by reading. It was just reading and how the gap in data was there about women's health versus men's health, clinical trials being based on the male average. There's a book called Invisible Women that was pretty influential for many of us working in the sector. I saw the gap and said, okay, well, I think I can do something there. Obviously, coming from a business background, but I felt like a real strength of mine has always been community building. And so going in and actually building the network and building the ecosystem. And now we're across 9 countries, which is really exciting. And it gives an outlet for many entrepreneurs who are often solo founders, female founders, and bootstrapping their businesses to have a network that they can kind of have peer-to-peer support, peer-to-peer mentorship. Moreover, a lot of what we're trying to do is amplify the industry and amplify the businesses in the industry. And we do that through, programming, thought leadership, research, but really having talks like the one we're having now, that we're going out and trying to just share that there is an underserved, an under-researched, and underfunded segment of technology called FemTech with a lot of space for new entrepreneurs to come in and grow. Given that the majority of the founders we have here in Asia are female, I think there's also a direct connection between the fact that we're looking at and serving, advising a lot of female entrepreneurs, or I should say women entrepreneurs, to support women consumers, and then educating a lot of investors and promoting the industry to investors so that they can start looking at gender lens investing, social impact investing, or even general health investing into the future. So that is what excites me, I guess, the most about it. And when it comes to the discussions around taboo or stigma or challenging topics, I think we can overcome that with amazing younger generations who are talking about this day in, day out. A lot of it is about raising awareness and education of not only the issues, but also the solutions that are available. People don't know what they don't know. So if we can share what might not be the average experience for someone, and there's a solution to help support that, I think that's really rewarding. Ultimately, it is a lot about community building, whether it's with the consumer community, whether it's with the founder community, with the investor community, and basically, governments and policymakers, and bringing all of this ecosystem together to create a really engaged and supportive network that's looking at women's health, because really women's health is societal health. When women are healthier, they can better take care of their families. They can work. They can create financial gain for a country. So, there are many positive parts of women's health beyond just the actual individual woman. It really does benefit society and the ability to caretake and contribute. Just the last word on this, I guess, before I hand it back to you, Anna, is looking at the two things to consider for women's equality and equity, gender equity and gender equality, is really looking at wealth and health and how those two things work together and how we lift women up in both of those areas to make sure that, and I say women inclusively, anyone with women's healthcare needs, that we lift women up to be able to get the healthcare access they need at affordable prices, and that it's available. And in turn, hopefully that means we'll see greater financial gain, which will allow women to take ownership of their lives more fully.
What you're saying makes me think, of course, about all the different opportunities that we can see, because we have seen something similar. We have seen the progress, we have seen what was possible, and then we can bring it to the places that we live in. It doesn't have to be a new country that we live in. It doesn't have to be, us kind of coming and saying, okay, you're doing it wrong here. Many people do it in their home countries. I know a lot of people who lived abroad and they came back and they started really impactful businesses because they saw what was available in the world, and they had the faith that it was possible for their country as well. So that is so beautiful. And this makes me think a bit also about this maybe dilemma about the innovation that needs to come from external sources instead of being driven internally. And I will explain. Here in Bulgaria, again, coming about topic of immigration, I got involved and I can even say stuck a bit for a longer time than I expected because of the international community here. And I got involved in the project supporting immigrants here. And during COVID, that was the main kind of source of my social life. I was attending events, I was virtual events, we're organizing things, we were building the website with information for foreigners living here. Nothing like that was available, and COVID really showcased how big of a gap there was between what was communicated by the government to the locals versus foreigners. So there was no one, official source of information that would be unbiased or would be actually focusing on life and lifestyle and things that people need instead of just translating the news in poor English. With my business partner, we saw this opportunity and we jumped into that. And I can say that this helped me integrate really well with those international citizens here, those international locals. I can call also Bulgarians that maybe travel, they speak languages as that part of community, right? International community. They speak more languages, they travel a lot, they maybe have lived abroad. They feel like foreigners oftentimes themselves back in their home countries. And I don't feel integrated in actual Bulgaria. That's the thing. I've been here for more than 4 years. And this is the only country where I don't feel I have integrated properly. And I wonder, because it could be just me, bringing this more global cosmopolitan outlook on life here, trying to establish it here, helping people feel welcome, and also the local community feel more tolerant or respectful or welcoming of the international community coming there. So I wonder how it was for you. Do you feel integrated in the community, in the local community, while focusing on the global vision, while bringing in this vision of what is possible that you saw elsewhere?
So I feel really lucky to answer that question because Singapore is incredibly diverse and incredibly respectful of the diversity and really celebrates diversity. And I mean that very sincerely. It is, I mean, every day I speak with people, much like in London, I had friends from all over the world, including British friends. Much like here, I have friends from all over the world, including Singaporean friends. We are a community here that I think is very inclusive, that is open to anyone coming in from overseas. And I think we're used to people kind of coming and going who are from overseas, but also our friends here who travel a ton. So it's a very international country, and I think very accepting of everyone. So I think that isn't a challenge in Singapore per se. That I have experienced. I have always felt very included and found it easy to integrate into the country. And the other thing is with Singapore, it's very clear. So setting up a business here, the rules are very clear. Paying your taxes is very clear. What is allowed is very clear. There's not gray areas. It's really clear about what's acceptable and what processes look like. And I think that makes it quite easy for everyone because we're all kind of on a level playing field moving forward together. It's a really pleasant way to live. It's a super, super safe place with a lot of celebrations, like I mentioned, and diversity. That's really embraced here in Singapore. And I'm fortunate to get to be a part of that community every day.
Yeah, sounds like indeed a really nice next step to consider for me then.
Absolutely. I think you'd find it really exciting and it's a wonderful place to be for even travel. So many places in Southeast Asia are just on the doorstep. There was even a point where I think I was in a country a month or more because it's all just so close by. So it's easy to get away. The airport's amazing. If I can talk about nothing else, I could talk about how the actual airport
Yeah.
in Singapore is phenomenal. So it makes it really, really easy to travel.
Yes, I am super excited to see it. Yeah, I will let you know when I'm
Oh, I
there.
look
I will
forward
ask
to
you for some
hosting you.
recommendations for
Yeah, of
Singapore.
course. I look forward to hosting you.
Thank you. So I have one last
Sure.
question. It's about building connection. It's about network. It's about the community, like you said. How can we, as we move to different places, and maybe like you and I, we hop one from one place to another, how can we make sure that our community stays nurtured? And how can we maybe be a bit more proactive in building this community? Because we need it, right? We oftentimes do it alone, not in a kind of this strategic way, meaning that yes, if I know people from there or I know people from there, certain things are available or certain doors are open. It's more about that support, right? And you never know whom you can help and who can help you. So what is your take on that? Because you said I that you love building communities.
I really do. And for me, a lot of it comes down to authenticity. I'm on this call with you today because I'm genuinely excited to chat with you. And I'm genuinely excited to hear about your life and your time in Italy and your time in Bulgaria, places I love and I've been. So it's just that genuine connection. So obviously being genuine and authentic, it's not going into a networking event and trying to meet everyone in the room. It's being purposeful in the discussions and really making sure that we're connecting with people the first time we meet them. In addition to that, there's some basic things, staying focused on LinkedIn, making sure that we're going to events and meeting people out, making sure we stay social, diversifying our interests to make sure that we're not just, if we're in FemTech, we're not only looking at women's health and only meeting people in women's health, that we're actually saying, well, what about broader tech? What about cybersecurity? What about compliance and data management? Those are all parts, but obviously feel like new communities to network with. As far as keeping up with communities, I think a big part of it is being open and inclusive and making sure that, we create space for people. And when we're with people, we really commit to being with them and giving them the attention. Also, I think I make a point, and I can't speak for others, but I make a point to always keep an ear open for opportunities and think of who that opportunity could be good for. It's not expecting anything in return, but really trying to say, how can I always try to be a giver rather than a taker? How can I always give? How can I always be someone who provides opportunities for others? Because the idea is that if we all did that all the time and we all thought about everyone else, we were always sponsoring everyone else, then what a great way to kind of build a community by thinking about others first and foremost and trying to help them achieve their goals and their dreams. And I think that in turn, that will come back, even if it's just through positive energy or whatever you want to call it. But hopefully through something more tangible eventually. But a lot of my time is spent on trying to connect people, especially with a more international network now. Yesterday, I had an old colleague in London reach out to ask if I knew anyone in Shanghai to help with a video editing project. I met another person in Hong Kong who's looking for a consultant who's very familiar with FDA regulation in the US. It's constantly like being someone who can help people connect and achieve what they're trying to achieve. And so I think it's actually creating value for people. So it's really not about quantity, it's about quality and authenticity when it comes to building communities.
I feel that it's becoming like that for me as well, just by the sheer fact that you know a lot of people, that you've had this experience, you can connect the dots easier. There were points in my career that I was collaborating with the same people on many different projects across countries, or bringing in new people to the same projects. You see it, you cannot unsee it afterwards. You think about those opportunities as something that you can share with others, because even if you want it, you can't possibly do them yourself. But it's also about, indeed, you start spotting what is good for others as well.
I really appreciate what you said there, and I think that's a really good point also, is like, the whole idea of living overseas or continuing to move internationally is to share the experience. So, we want to meet people that we can share work with, that we can share our lives with, we can share experiences with, share travel with. So I really love that you use the word share there. That's the best word we've used on the podcast yet, is how are we sharing our experiences and our knowledge and our networks with others.
I love that. Thank you so much, Lindsay. So I have taken note of a couple of the lessons that we have mentioned today. So the first one, which really resonated with me once again, because I don't think I did it at the beginning for myself like that, was move abroad for yourself, right? Have your values properly clear to you, so you know what you're doing it for, and then follow that. Maybe people will not understand you, maybe they will not see you having good time, or they will think, okay, get your life together, why you can't settle doing so many things. But this is how we live our lives, this is how we live, that's what we need, I think. And I really loved what you're talking about, the passion and purpose, the triangle, right? The curiosity, passion, and purpose of the reasons why we move. And those, again, could be really, really present. It needs to be something that we always come back to when we build our career, when we choose a new place. I think with everything, right? That's what we realize about life. And the community, for me, it's also something super important. It can be challenging. I know that it can be heartbreaking sometimes when people move, and being in places like Singapore, or when I lived in Brussels, it happened so often that the only people that you make the good connection with, build friendship, then they go, and it can be challenging. But we have to keep doing that. We have to start the relationships. We have to invest in them, because then this comes back to us and we don't know how yet. It will always be something that will nurture us. And sharing, yes, I really love that too. Sharing experiences, sharing the connections, sharing our life with others by building something with them, or passing on the opportunities to them. That was really beautiful. Would you like to add anything to these lessons, something
Oh,
that
I'm
came
sure
back
there are
to you
so
as
many
a
more, but I
thought?
think you beautifully summarized our conversation today. And I really hope this helps someone or inspires someone. And obviously, I invite everyone to feel free to reach out on LinkedIn if they have any questions or want to learn more. And I'm very open always to connect. Again, it's just about building community. So anyone I can help, I'm absolutely happy to chat with. So thank you so much for chatting with me today. I really enjoyed our discussion, and it's so nice to meet someone else who's as passionate about this international exciting life that we're living and the careers we're building around the world. So thank you for sharing your thoughts with me as well. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, Lindsay. Where can we find more about your work,
Thank
follow
you so much for
you?
asking.
What
So
can
on
we do?
LinkedIn, you can obviously find me, Lindsay Davis. To look up our organization, you can look up FemTech Association Asia. We're also on Instagram at FemTech Asia. So anyone who wants to follow anytime, please feel free to reach out and support the mission for available, accessible, and affordable healthcare for all women across Asia is really our vision.